and today I'm going to do a very quick run through of some of the earlier excavations to bring us up to date with the last couple of years, where some of the finds from the dig have been really quite extraordinary. So it's a bit of a run through at pace, because there's a lot of slides to get through and I've got just over half an hour. So firstly, let's look at the hill fort. There's a lovely picture of the fort, and where we have been excavating, if you look at the photograph, is that long sloping shoulder of East Lomond that looks down towards Glenrothes, Kirkcaldy and across to the Forth. And we've highlighted here the kind of main defensive features of the hill fort itself, and we haven't excavated on that hill fort. So if you look at that, you would probably say the topology is very similar to what we would describe as a nuclear hill fort in the 7th, 8th century, but we haven't excavated there. If we do, and we find that is fairly typical, that will extend the life of activity on that hill, because at the moment we know for sure through carbon-14 dating, we have secured dates from the 1st century AD through to the 7th century AD. So if, when we get up there, we find we can extend that, that is really quite something. It's already quite something special. The annexe. Now, this is a result of a scan that we did over 4 days with a huge piece of equipment in 2018. And the cautionary tale here is when you look at this, you're not looking at the skeleton of a settlement at one time. You're looking at the remains of settlement over hundreds of years, over centuries. So some of the features, some of the stone bases of walls and other features will connect here and make it look as though we've got something. But the one thing we can definitely say is that there is human activity and settlement on this annexe over a very long period of time. And that continuity of activity is what excites all of us who work on it. We can also say for definite that we have a very significant defining wall, a wall which defines this annexe. And you can see some buttressing on the wall up there on the left side. And that wall we know exists, and here it is. Here's the remains of some of that wall underground, and it's about 2.6 metres thick in parts, and it runs for almost 160 metres around the hill. So this annexe has this major defensive feature surrounding it. It's not as thick as this everywhere on the hill, but in some areas it is a very substantial defensive fortification. First season, 2014, and here's a picture of the actual trench and some of our very early dates. All the dates that I'm going to show you today are all all C14 carbon dates back from the Scottish Universities Research Centre, SUARC, so they're all attested by credible sources. And the finds, which I've highlighted here at the bottom, you would see these on most Iron Age hill forts. But the two that really excited us in this early stage was the horse's bridle bit, an elite activity, horsemanship up on the hill, or repairing bits from horses, and the crucible fragments, which indicated to us at the time that they are dealing with not just ironworking and furnace and metalworking, but they're also dealing with precious metals as well. And this is, I'm quickly running through because I want to get to the most recent results. We have plenty of examples of early Roman Iron Age material. Here's a blue melon bead, commonly 1st, 2nd century, and a twisted glass bangle. Early indications that we had plenty of contact with Rome here. It's the same pieces, magnified. The blue is given, it comes through cobalt. It's a blue glass paste, used for officers' cloaks and to dress horses' bridle reins. Not only that, we have Red Oxfordshire ware, we have Nene Valley ware. There have been coins found by metal detectorists on the hill. So these are traditional feasting and drinking gifts, traditional Roman diplomatic gifts. And that question about the relationship between Rome and where it moves about in Scotland in this early period, and the people in Fife specifically, is something that interests a lot of us on this dig, because that is not properly investigated and attested and published yet. Not just Roman material, also material that we know is produced more locally. So the top image is a rosette-headed pin. It's a copper alloy pin. That's it in the ground. Below that, we have a twisted, it's probably a ponytail ring or something like that. It's either shale or cannel coal. And the hearths. We have so many hearths on East Lomond, we've lost count. But in that one image, there are something like 6 hearths positioned on top, more or less on top of each other. And every time you have a hearth, you have a building. And I'll say a bit more about that later on. There's a close-up of that rosette-headed pin. Copper alloy, there's some lead in it, there's traces of silver, but it's tinned to make it look like silver. So costume jewellery of the day, if you like. And a lovely piece and quite rare, really. We know that Curl in the 1920s found the moulds for these pins. There's examples there at Traprainlaw, south of Edinburgh. So that we know they're manufactured on the east coast. And the cluster of pins there is from a votive deposit up at Cove Sea, way up in the north there. So where we find these pins are highlighted with the red dots on this map. It's quite an unusual and quite a sparse distribution map. And then we see this cluster away down in that corner of England, Wales, and I think there's a reason for that, but I'm not going to go into that because I have to decide what I say and what I can't say and what I've got time to say. But there's a whole story there. Into the post-Roman early medieval period, we have plenty of evidence of metalworking. We have ingot moulds, crucible fragments, this lovely section piece, which I'm sure you've seen before with all these coloured stone, is like a ritual sealing of what turned out to be a water tank. Below these coloured stones, there is a square box of clay, about 3 inches thick, and it's beside a blacksmithing site. There's the ingot mould there, very similar to the one in the National Museum in Edinburgh, and crucible fragments popping up all over the place, telling us more about the lovely work that's been done by people working on East Lomond. We also have Eware pottery. We know that it's made in France, and it is used to transport oils and dyes, and it comes up normally through Tintagel up into the west coast, into royal and elite sites. And if you look at the distribution map of east of Scotland, you'll see there are very few places where you find this kind of pottery. East Lomond is one of them. I believe Rhynie is another. And I think recently at King's Seat, there's been some excavations there where some of this Eware pottery has been found. Very rare and used to transport elite materials, telling us that East Lomond is connected into elite trade routes for a long period of time. One of our early finds is this Pictish spear or lance head, yet to be defined. Gordon and I are still talking about this. Late 6th to early 7th century, reminding us of the military element of Pictish society, which is attested in the Roman sources, and I'll say a wee bit more about that later on. So these early digs, under the auspices of the Trust and Dr. Oliver O'Grady, terminated in 2020 with Oliver's untimely passing, but we owe a lot to Oliver for putting us on the path at East Lomond. So with Oliver's passing, the Trust on the estate signed a collaboration agreement with Aberdeen University to investigate East Lomond, Hillfort and its environs. So there's East Lomond in the background there. This is taken from between the two hills, East and West Lomond. And in the foreground there, that other hill you see is called Maiden Castle, and it's described in Canmore as an unfinished Iron Age hill fort. I think not. If it is, it must be the most easily overrun hill fort in the country. I don't think it's a hill fort, but I do think it's a place of gathering. And someone raised a question earlier on about places where people gather. And this nestles in a sheltered space between East and West Lomond, hidden from view unless you know where it is. I don't think it's a hill fort, but I do think it's something that the peoples of the area would have used perhaps to congregate. Time will tell when we get into investigating Maiden Castle, because again, that's never been excavated previously. So 22 and 23, they tie up with Aberdeen University, and specifically they wanted to explore the outer annexe wall and gradually move in towards the hill fort proper. 2022, hearths galore, and we continue to get hearths galore every year, and we always sample them. We take carbon C14 dating processes forward after we take the sample. And more crucible fragments coming up as well. Really quite interesting. Trench 1 in 2022. I put this up because we had believed that what we were seeing on the walls of East Lomond was tumble from that outer annex wall. But if you look closely, and we now see it in other parts as well, actually they are buttressing the wall because the wall slopes down on the hill. So they're actually building buttresses into the wall. So construction techniques that we weren't aware of before prior to getting our teeth into East Lomond. Some small finds from that 2022 as a gaming piece there. Partial hearth, clay in the bottom with that lovely hole. And for those of you who are keen fans of home decorating, there's a plumb line. You could tie your string onto that and make a straight line. So the construction evidence that we see here at the wall. And here's Eric and Sue, two of our volunteers. And just behind them in red there, I've outlined the remains of the rampart wall at that point. Because we've taken bits into the wall, digs into the wall at different sites along that 160 metre parameter. More hearths. I mean, I could show you so many hearths, but we'd all probably fall asleep. At the end of 2023, these were the conclusions that we were coming to. We have secured dates all through those first 700 years of the first millennia. We might be able to extend that. But there's some very interesting Bronze Age stuff going on up there as well. And as I was talking to somebody this morning, there have been lots of lithics found on the lower slopes of West Lomond, Neolithic. So there's something going on there too that maybe at some point we'll get to excavate. But they continue to have access to Roman material in the post-Roman period as well. So 2024, I'm coming up to the good juicy stuff now. More and more hearths. In fact, I think in the 10 by 10 trench in 2024, we had 18 hearths, and we didn't bottom the trench. There's still another half metre of deposit below that. And where you have a trench, where you have a hearth, you have a building. So the density of settlement there is really quite significant, and it extends over a site which is almost about 2 acres in size. Not just hearths, but some lovely pieces coming up as well. And here's a quernstone, and two of our lovely volunteers. There's Katja and Fiona with their quernstone from last year. And here's an overhead shot of that. Now, I can count, and I'll leave that up for a minute. I can count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, at least 10 hearths on that site. And this is in one trench, and it is nowhere near the bottom. So that's testament to that density. One of the things that we do find is a fair number of these. We have about half a dozen now. These are spear butts. So it is again testament to that Pictish warrior culture that we see elsewhere. So this is the other end of the spear. This is not the spear head. This is the spear butt, which rests in the ground. And there are a number of these from Traprainlaw. There are now a number of these from East Lomond. But interestingly, when we look at the warrior stones that we have, that have been found in Scotland over recent years, and you look at the stone carvings, if you look at the base of that spear, that's not the same as that. So it's not ones that are resting in the ground. You've got that kind of doorknob. And this is known as a doorknob spear butt. The other thing to notice is the size of that spear. That's not a throwing spear. That's a handheld spear. This is hand-to-hand combat, and with that weighted bit on the end, it's not going to fly very far anyway. So this is something different. This is something that is in your face. And this is the Tulloch warrior stone from Perthshire. And here's our chap from Fife. This is the Colessi man, and if you see the bottom of his spear as well, he also has a doorknob spear butt. Now these guys didn't go to IKEA because there was no IKEA in these days, but that suggests this suggests that these images are perhaps of people who are significant, a significant warrior or a chieftain or someone of status in that period, and they have a different kind of spear butt from the ones that we find on a more regular basis, the doorknob spear butt. And here is the East Lomond doorknob spear butt, which still had material inside it. And Cassius Dio, writing in the history, says that you can hear the picks coming. You can hear this this rattling, and I suspect it's being made with whatever's in the base of these spears. It's a bronze object, so it has copper and tin, which again means they're connected to trade routes and they're being able to use different kinds of materials to produce items like this. And these are very rare. I think there's only been 2 or 3 examples of this in Scotland. Moulds, I think, have been found in the Western Isles and Shetland, and there are a number of these found in Ireland as well. But in Scotland, very few, and we have one here in East Lomond. That's it, sitting prettily in its wee box. So on to 2025, and the 2025 trenches are the 2 blue trenches. And I know a number of the people here sitting in the audience were in the trenches this year. There's at least a dozen of our excavators here, so you'll remember this. And the big trench we quite consciously put to abut the 2017 big trench, where we had a lot of very interesting material, so we could try and extend that sequence in that area that we could understand what was going on there. So the 2025 trenches, here we go. And we'll start from that later period. And I can see John there, and I think I can see Alison's head peeking into that photograph, pointing at the hearth. So we not far below the ground, and it's the same on every dig. We know the stratigraphy that we are hitting once we go about 10 inches or a foot below ground. We are immediately into 6th, 7th century material, and we don't seem at the moment to have anything much beyond that, and that might tell us a terminal date for the use of the site. So in this period, we've got fragments of pottery, and we've got pin moulds, and there's the schematic. Moving back in time to the 5th, 6th century, we begin to see more hearths coming up. And if I put on my glasses, I would be able to read what I can see in that circle, but oh, excuse me. Moving on to 3rd, 4th century, we begin to see more, a bigger density of hearths. And I think this is probably the peak period of settlement on East Lomond. And here we are towards the end of the dig in 2025. And in the main trench, if you look closely up at the top there, you'll see those stones. Now, this was a huge, significant building. Can't guess at the size of it. It's one end of it. We've actually taken a slot through it, which you can see, but massive stone construction. And you can just make out at the edge of the trench, in the inner part of that building, a hearth. Can you see that? So this building must extend quite a bit beyond there. And I'm not going to say an awful lot more about that for now, because I want to come on to what people have asked me about frequently, the face that we found on East Lomond this year. Now, that's it closer up, and you can see the big bubbly eyes, you can see the nose, and if you look closely at the top, you can see the wee notches identifying a hairline. Now, Gordon calls this Bart Simpson and says it's a Pictish face. Now, it might be a Pictish face. Is this something like we would buy a painting or a bit of ornamentation for the mantelpiece? Is it something like that? Is this Uncle Dave? And there he sits. Who knows? But I want to draw your attention to something else. Now, just bear in mind those notches along the head, those big boogly eyes, and have a look at the Book of Deer. And this is a 10th century illustrated manuscript from the monastery up in Deer, Aberdeenshire. And look at the way the human face is represented. Now, this is 10 centuries. This is 300 years, 400 years after the time period that we're talking about, when other contexts within which we've taken out that stone. And again, looking at the 4 evangelists in the Book of Deer. So here's Matthew, Mark, Luke and John, but look at the representation of the human face. Now, what is this telling us? What questions does this throw up? Is this the way that the human face was being represented? Is this the way this particular monastic group were representing human face? Egyptian hieroglyphs don't change much over a long, long period of time. Is it the same here? Is this what we're finding? So there's a lot of work to be done, and I think a lot more investigation into the Pictish face. But that was a lovely find by one of Gordon's students from Aberdeen University on her first dig, I believe, and you can imagine how overjoyed she was. And it raises questions for us as well. Again, it's a quite unique thing. I can't think of anything else that I've seen in recent excavations in the country that's quite like that. Okay, now we talked a bit about this pin earlier on. This is the copper alloy pin that was tinned to make it look like silver. And in 2025, another pin. Now this pin was found in two pieces, and those of you who can look closely will see there's a bottom piece and there's a crack and there's a top piece. And these were found a day apart. And they fitted beautifully. And I know that Mike Ballantyne is in here somewhere, and Mike is the chap who found the top piece. Mike, this is what it looks like. It's a lovely ornate piece. It's just dress pin. I've tried to sort of blow it up. It's got a bit fuzzy there. But there might have been a precious stone in that setting at the top there. And I can tell you, Mike, that we've had it tested. And it is not copper alloy tinned to make it look like silver. It is actual silver. So we have a silver dress pin coming out of East Lomond. And we've known that they're working with precious metals and melting down Roman silver and creating lovely pieces. And there's this thing now. This is it. It was beside a hearth. It's in a kind of 5th to 7th century context, but the soil samples are away. We've not got the radiocarbon dates back yet. So it's in that post-Roman, early medieval context. And again, found by one of our local excavators, Anne, who's not with us today. But this is the piece that had everyone crowded round because we'd never really seen anything like it. It's about 1 foot in length and it is very heavy. It is cast iron and it has now been through the Scottish Conservation Studio and it looks like this. And it is something else. It's weighty. It's an agricultural tool. It's a mattock. And I know one or two people here have been up to see it and have seen this already. It's a very interesting piece. It could be used as a weapon as well as a construction and agricultural tool. And again, I don't think I'm aware of anything quite like this being found in a Pictish context. And it'll be interesting to see when the dates come back, just exactly what it is that we have here. It's our star find. We call it a Mattock axe from one of the latest buildings in Trent 7, and it is exceptionally rare in post-Roman contexts. That's it, just so you get one last view of it before I move on and contextualise East Lomond. And we've looked for parallels for East Lomond, and the two that strike us or that we know about, one is Traprain Law. Now, we don't have the density of Roman material that Traprain Law has, but in terms of what we see inside and in the settlement, if anything, East Lomond seems to have a longer settlement period than Traprain. And I think we've probably dug about 5% of East Lomond yet. There's still an awful lot more to excavate there. And I think the one thing that Gordon and I are talking about is how we can extend the digs. A 2-week dig will take us from that 5th to 7th century period, maybe to Roman Iron Age, but we know there's more material below there. So we're keen eventually to try and extend those dates, but a 2-week dig does have its restrictions in what you can do. Another parallel, Tapa North, very similar chronology to East Lomond. And Gordon reckons about 800 house platforms there, and a much larger and different kind of settlement from East Lomond. That's a different character of site as well. It's a much further beyond that kind of Roman frontier that was here for a period of time. The radiocarbon dating evidence from East Lomond, well, you can see so far we have that late 1st century right through into 7th, 8th century at East Lomond, and that's a collation of all the C14 carbon dates to date with our digs. There have been 8 excavations up there now, and I think we're going to be there for a few years yet. Gordon and I have signed a deal to be there for the next 3 years at least, so there's going to be a lot more to look at. Considering the modelling of the dates, very similar model dates, and it may change, as Gordon says, with more to come. One of the interesting features up at Tappan North, where Gordon has done a lot of work previously, in that power centre at Riney, is that it overlooks something very significant in the landscape. And this Pictish enclosure that you can see here is very similar to a large ring fort. But the range, and I know the character of the evidence that Gordon and his team brought was really quite exceptional. So it has the potential to tell us a great deal about the emergence of, and the character of early kingship and the landscapes of power and governance that we see in that early medieval period in Scotland. So below East Lomond, well, here's an image from using aerial photography of Lathrisk, which is near Falkland, just below East Lomond. You can look down and see this farm from the top of the hill. You have the Pictish stones from the Westfield, from the Byre. The notched rectangle, by the way, that Pictish stone, that's it there. So I'll just show my t-shirt again. You can get these t-shirts. This is East Lomond, this is Falkland Palace, and these are the Pictish symbols from the stones. And this was this year's t-shirt. So we are certain that East Lomond itself is an elite centre, is a power centre, it's possibly Royal Pictish centre, and there are indicators below East Lomond that haven't been excavated ever that suggest there is another major settlement in the area at Lathrisk, and I don't think it's the only one, to be fair. So what we're looking at in that context is the emergence of royal power in Pictland, and it is the late 6th century before we have a Pictish king that is named. But going back to the early writings, they do talk about beyond the Roman frontier that it's the people with the power and the swords and the militaria that are ruling the roost. It's real, popular phrase here, it's a real Game of Thrones type culture. It's militaria that we're seeing, and strength there. The Venicones, the tribe that Ptolemy mentions in this area in the 2nd century AD, about 150 AD, that name vanishes by the 4th century. They are part of that Meattai conspiracy, the Meattai confederacy, not conspiracy, that the Romans remark on. So you have the Caledonian Confederacy in the north, you have the Meattai Confederacy in the south, and they appear to be part of that. But at East Lomond we have clear evidence for centralisation, warriorhood, and the trappings of an emerging royal elite in that 4th to 7th century AD period. Now I've used the Riney man there, and I promised Gordon that I would say something about the Riney man. There's a new monograph about the Riney man. The Society of Antiquaries are about to publish the monograph, and the e-book will be ready in 2026. But the Society is also launching a crowdfunding campaign if people want a printed version of the monograph. So you can see there what is being suggested. Follow either Northern Picts or the Society of Antiquaries website, and you'll see pleads for contributions so that we can actually publish this monograph about this important site. Coming back to East Lomond, what we can say following our 2020-25 excavations, it is an elite centre of power in southern Pictland. This next point, a dominant strategic location on the peninsula of Fife. I've been making this point for years, and I still think this holds good for why East Lomond is so important. If you have a relationship with the people in Fife who are based at East Lomond, then you are controlling the Forth and the Tay, the two main waterways right into the heart of Scotland. And that is a strategically significant thing for Romans and anyone else who's coming, because the Northumbrians come to visit Fife at a later stage as well. That is this landscape dominates those two waterways, and the people here, I think, have been pretty important throughout history, which is why we see that continuity of occupation and trade in the post-Roman period and into the Pictish era as well. The annexe, where we have been excavating, is also a centre of production and trade. Metalworking, and I've given the evidence for these things, densely populated, militaria, horsemanship, culture, and tools and construction. It's all there on East Lomond, and there's a lot more on East Lomond that we haven't looked at. Now, someone did ask me, well, what's it like digging up there, Joe? Well, it's windy, which is why every excavator gets a set of goggles every year so that the steward doesn't get in their eyes. Often at the end of a day, if we've been sweating, and people will take off their goggles, we all look like owls because the face is black, but these big protected eyes. And here's a this is from this year. And I think that shoe that's standing up there with the yellow jacket. The cloud behind the two chaps had just vanished off the hill. But that cloud, we sat working in that cloud for most of the afternoon, and we could barely see each other at the side of the trenches. And then it clears, then you get this beautiful landscape. So it changes hour by hour, day by day on East Lomond. So we all go prepared. 1 minute we'll be in t-shirts, next minute we'll be fully wrapped up as though it's winter, and it can be windy at all times. But there is a secret at East Lomond that only the excavators know about. And it's our lunch spot, because it's the best lunch spot in the country. There we are, and we're sitting overlooking the Firth of Forth, and the Lothians, and Glenrothes, and Kirkcaldy, and all up the east coast, and we sit there for an hour each day, and of course it's always sunny at lunchtime in East Lomond, and that's only known to a few, but that's the story of 2025, some of the extraordinary finds that are coming out of East Lomond, and we're going to be there for years to come. So if you ever really fancy getting a trowel in your hand, you've never done it before, look for us on the Falkland Estate website. And because it's a community dig, it has always been and always will be a community dig. We now have our community dig, and we have the students, and we merge people together, and it's a great learning experience for a lot of people. And the culture's good, as you can see. We share food. There's no alcohol, so there's no wine. I'm sorry, don't allow that on site. But it's a good experience. And if you want to try it, and you've ever thought, I think I should, and 2 people today already have said, I've always wanted to go up there. Well, there is an opportunity to do it. And we're there next year in July, so look out for our site. Thank you for listening. Glad to answer any questions, and hope you enjoyed the presentation. Thank you.